Welcome to the Think Bigger Mastermind, where Steve Yeager and Justin Stoddart interview the best and brightest minds in business and real estate. Their focus is helping realtors in Portland, Oregon solve the industry's biggest problems, enabling listeners to take their individual businesses to the next level. And don't forget to subscribe to get their most current episodes.
All right, I hear we're live. Welcome, world. Small portion of the world, I'm sure, that's gonna see this. Justin Stoddart here. I've got my co-host Steve Yeager, who's on the call with us today, and also our special guest, Mr. Tony Gillard, who we're going to be extracting some really valuable information out of Tony today. Great person and great professional. A little background on Tony, and we're kind of in the process of naming this podcast webinar, Think Bigger podcast, Think Bigger webinar, to be determined, to be continued, this conversation. But as of now, welcome to the Think Bigger podcast. And again, my pleasure to introduce Tony Gillard, who's going to be our inaugural interview today. Excited to have him on the call here. Tony's been in the lending business for 14 years. Actually, authored a book, which I think says a lot about him. Buying a home, secrets revealed. A behind-the-scenes look at how the mortgage process really works. So for all of those that are wondering if Tony really knows what he's talking about, you'll have to read his book. It's proof. The proof is in the pudding. That and he does a lot of business, which also helps. He is also doubles as a social media marketing expert. He's a personal and professional development nerd, self-proclaimed. Part-time guitar player. When I bring Tony up here, you'll see proof of that in the background. And a full-time father. And I'll tell you, I've had the privilege of knowing Tony for probably about a year, and we've become very, very good friends in that process. And I'm always inspired by stories of him talking about his family, and has had just some really neat challenges in life. And I say neat because it really helped define him and who he's become, and helped define his why. As to why he does what he does and why he's so adamant about changing the space of lending and dominating. So anyway, with that, I'm gonna let both Steve and Tony say hello.
Hello.
Hello, guys. Definitely honored to be part of this podcast and your very first interviewee. So I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons that Justin and I are so excited about this medium is, we are both, you said you're a self-proclaimed, nerd here. We're self-proclaimed podcast nerds. We both love podcasts. And Justin is great about it. I think Justin might listen to one every day on the way into work and one on the way home. But I think being part of something like this and being able to ask people questions, Justin and I are very similar, and we like to ask tons of questions from people, and it's one of the ways I learn, and I think there's a lot of people like us, and so when you get talented people like yourself, and you can get them in this room, sometimes you sit down, you ask a bunch of questions, you say, man, I wish everyone got to hear that. Well, then what a great way to do that. What a great way to get the message out, and people that are doing things at a very, very high level and a disruptive level, I think we all get better by learning from them. So I'm just real excited about this, and I thank you for being I told you before we got on the air, being our guinea pig. You never know what's going to happen on the first show, so you're very brave. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it as well.
So Tony, let's go ahead and jump in. And Steve, of course, at any time, feel free to take this in a different direction. But I know some of the stuff that I want to share with, some more stuff that I want to learn about you, Tony. And some of the stuff that I want to have our audience hear and learn from you is kind of what makes you different. Obviously, in a world of, rocket loans, where you've got really the mortgage world attempting to be commoditized by major brands, there's someone like you who's really coming in and differentiating in a big way. Talk to us, if you wouldn't mind, maybe kind of what makes you different. Why would somebody choose a guy like you over doing a Quicken rocket loan? Nothing against rocket loans. In fact, I probably ought to also say this to start. These opinions that are sharing are ours and ours alone. They absolutely don't reflect our employer, Steve and mine anyway. Old Republic Title. This little side project that we're having some fun with to learn and develop. So anyway, with that, Tony, tell us kind of really how you're differentiating in the space.
I think there's really two distinct things that make me different. One is the company and the culture that I work for, Aspire Mortgage Group. We've kind of, over the number of years that we've been in this industry, and I've, like you had indicated, I've been doing this for 14 years now. There's this recurring kind of information that we get from realtors, feedback that we get, that they're kind of always complaining about the lending world with lack of communication, surprises at closing, or delays, right? Those are kind of the fundamental things that realtors complain about in the lending world in general. And so as a company, we address those things. We address those things through very specific and strategic systems, and then also the staff and the culture to execute those systems. And I'm passionate about it because we've actually created a process that's very predictable, and part of it is called the Process Simplifier, which creates these updates, very consistent updates every single week, so that all the parties on the transaction are on the same page. And in conjunction with that, we have some video updates that go out at various milestone times as well. So what we try to do and what we've created is the ability to be proactive and to beat everyone to the punch. And so what I've identified with clients over these years is that the anxiety starts to build when they don't know what's going on, right? So when they haven't heard from someone, they generally reach out first to the realtor. And then the realtor has to reach out to the lender. And so what ends up happening is there's this string of communication, potentially communication gaps, that really frustrates the people that are involved. And our objective in the systems that we've created is to beat everyone to the punch, to provide that level of communication that's consistent throughout the transaction, so that nobody is left wondering where things are at. Whether it's good or bad, you know, there are things that come up in transaction. I'd love to say that we've figured it all out and all our transactions are hiccup-free, but the reality is that there's a lot of moving parts, which, in reference to the Rocket Loan things, will be a really interesting case study to see how they actually execute any loans, because it would be very, very difficult, I think, for a computer to address the many, many moving parts that come up in the course of a transaction. But all that is to say that we have several systems and we have a culture that's dedicated to making certain that all the parties are informed throughout the transaction. That's just one small part of those systems. But the second reason is really what I'm most passionate about, and that comes down to helping realtors build business. I feel like in an era when, in kind of the 2000s, when there was a lot of business, it seemed to me as though lenders could kind of buy loyalty. You know, there was like, what have you done for me lately? Was a bit of a recurrent thing, right? Like, who's taking me to dinner? Who's taking me out golfing? And for me, I really didn't. That didn't fit with my personality. The truth is, I'd rather come home and hang out with my family than go out and have dinner with other people. And so what I did was I went outside of our industry, real estate and lending, and I started getting coached in the realm of social media and video marketing. And I realized, going through this professional coaching, that I was getting access to information that nobody was doing. And this is going back to about 2012. Nobody was talking about this. And I really thought at that point, it's like, if I can bring you a paycheck, then I can create real loyalty. If I can generate value in your business, then I can create real loyalty. And so the agents that I work with refer me strongly because they know the value that I bring to that relationship. And so, I mean, I have one agent that I work with that had 18 purchase transactions last year, and I got 15 of them. One of them was cash, and 2 of them worked for banks. She just refers me so strongly because she, on the one hand, is confident in our systems, and she knows that it's going to get done. But on the other hand, and I think really, truly where the real loyalty is the fact that I've helped her go from, I think, 7 transactions in 2014 to she did 42 transactions in 2015. And I handle all of her marketing. And so that, I believe, is where the real loyalty lies. And so when she's sitting down with a customer, she says, listen, that's great that you're pre-approved with this bank or that bank, but I can't really guarantee my level of service unless you use my team. And one of the integral people on my team is my mortgage guy, Tony. So it's a real strong introduction. It's a very strong referral. And I believe that that's based on loyalty. And that is all based on what I'm passionate about, which is bringing true value to these realtor relationships through the strategies and techniques that I can help them with through social media and video marketing.
So, Tony, maybe take us back a little bit. You've been in the business for 14 years. You know, what made you get into this business? You obviously have a love for people and taking care of people, but what made you want to get into the lending business?
It's funny because after college, I was a director of marketing for a consumer electronics company for 10 years. And it was there was some consumer contact, but it was, by and large, it was business to business. I cut my teeth in marketing on a real big scale. We were a national brand, and we owned multiple brands. But I didn't like the fact that what I did, what I created, was so distant, that I didn't have that personal contact with people. And now, when I got into mortgage, which incidentally was by the recommendation of an accountant friend that I was helping with, he was starting a firm and I was helping him with some PR and some design work. And he said, hey, you ought to get into mortgages. And I said, where did that come from? I don't even know how to spell the word. And much less like what it entails. In fact, I had already bought a home at that point, and I was clueless on the whole process. And so he had said that he had a couple clients that were just doing quite well, and this was back in 2000. And so I'd been long-standing with this company, and so I started to kind of look outside and interviewed with a couple of his clients, kind of learned a little bit. Every vacation I took was going to trainings and learning the business. And what I started to really love about it was the people-to-people contact, really making a dramatic impact in people's lives. And so over the course of the first number of years in the business, that started to fade a little bit because the transactions were really coming quite a bit. I mean, this was now 2003, 4, 5, and it's like you pick up the phone and you're gonna have a deal, and I felt like it started to get a bit transactional, and that's what back then I was sensing with realtor relationships and other referral partner relationships being built around something that just wouldn't stand the test of time. And so as I went into the professional coaching realm, not myself, but getting coaching, paying for coaching, I noticed that there was this tremendous value and this void that our industry didn't even know about. They didn't even know this new communication medium. Everyone knew about Facebook. They just had no idea how to leverage it for their own business. And so for me, coming away from that initial coaching and now having continued that coaching, I just know I can sit across the table from any agent, regardless of their level of expertise and experience, and know that I have real value to bring to their business. And so I guess that's where my passion lies, is, I think the most recent statistic is that America leads the amount of time that we spend on the internet in Facebook. And it's 16% of the time that Americans spend on the internet is spent looking at Facebook. And it's like, when you consider the amount of time that people do engage in the internet with work, with smartphones, I mean, people are never unplugged. And so this is a significant portion of their day. And when you start to look at Facebook as an engine, like how it actually functions, there is such unbelievable untapped potential, and people just don't really know about it. And so my passion is to bring to the forefront this knowledge of how it works, but then really how to most efficiently leverage it to increase business.
So what would you say is the average person's, I guess, ability level or knowledge level of social media, whether they use it every day, but when you sit down with somebody and talk to them about really using social media to help market themselves with their business, do you find that people kind of find themselves a little more savvy than they actually are, or do you find the opposite?
Well, this is no disrespect to anyone, and they'll probably get some fired up people when I say this, but I honestly believe that people are clueless.
Mm-hmm.
They make attempts, and I see the attempts, but they don't understand that in many ways the things that they're doing is actually curtailing the exposure of what they're trying to promote, because they don't understand how Facebook really works. So Facebook is just a newer version of Google and SEO, right? So Google was a platform that acquired people's search habits and therefore was able to profile people, and then they started selling AdWords and pay-per-click because they have these pools of profile and profiles, and so you can highly target individuals. The problem is, as most agents know now, Google AdWords and pay-per-click stuff through Google is ridiculously expensive because there's so much competition for those AdWords that apply to their business. But when you look at Facebook, Facebook has a similar SEO. It's called EdgeRank, and it's the way in which they kind of broadcast people's messages. Because think about it, if you've got 1.3 billion users that are talking constantly, 16% of the time that they're on the internet, there's just too much stuff going on. So what Facebook does through EdgeRank is they measure you as a participant in two different ways. One is, are you a stalker or are you a content creator? So that's the one way. And then the other way, and this is the magic, where magic in Facebook happens, is, do people care about what you're creating? Is there any engagement? And if there's engagement, then more people should see it. And so there's real distinct strategies on how you can organically affect Facebook to broadcast your message to a broader audience. And very, very few people understand how that mechanism works. And then when you get into the paid side, what's crazy is Facebook launched a program. I think it was a little over 2 years ago. It was called Facebook Connect in its beta form. But when they rolled it out, all of us just had to accept the new terms and conditions. And we all did because we're addicted, right? I mean, we can't stand in a lunch line without pulling up Facebook. And so everybody just mindlessly said, yep, I accept. What they did was they placed a tracking pixel in every browser that you utilize to access Facebook, which means that they now track your search behaviors. And so you may have experienced where you search for a cordless drill on Google, and then the next time you open up Facebook, you start seeing Home Depot ads in your sidebar, right? That's because they're profiling you, and those big box advertisers just sling money, and they sling money at some of those targets. Well, what I'm able to do, I mean, think about this. What does a new home buyer generally do when they, well in advance of ever contacting an agent, when like the spouse and them decide, oh, hey, honey, we ought to start thinking about our next home or our first home? They jump on the Google. They jump on Google, Trulia, Zillow. That's how Zillow aggregates leads, right? But when you're Facebook and you're tracking every one of their search behaviors, what you begin to see is, hey, they're looking in West Lynn at 385, 390, 397, and they start profiling and tightening this little pool of people that are likely to move to West Lynn in a price range of 350 to 400, what their household income demographic is, and I can target those specific people for my agent's listings in those neighborhoods. And so one of the strategies that we've done that's very, very effective is we do some lead-up paid-for advertising and landing pages for my agents' listings prior to their open house. And over the course of the last, it's probably been about 8 months that we've been doing this, my agents' open houses are getting, on average, about 40 couples come through. And throughout the summer, we haven't had a lot of open houses recently, but they're starting to heat up again. But over those summer months through September, one particular agent I was working with, that we were doing this on every single one of her listings, she sold every single one of them in less than a week or considerable amount over asking. And the reason is because when you create that competition, and listen, I know that we're also benefiting from a really strong market. I'm not naive to the fact that other agents are getting competing offers and things like that as well.
Sure.
But the consistency of turnout that we had for open houses and the amount of activity that we would get immediately after those open houses was consistent from listing to listing, and undeniable, frankly. So that's one of the strategies that we can do to highly target and not spend a lot of money to get people in front of those open houses, and it's been super exciting.
One thing that I want to share, or just highlight, Tony, that maybe has some similarities with our thought process, and that's why I love spending time with you, because it really is kind of aligns with our vision, is that, you know, the world of real estate is trying to be commoditized by the internet, right? There's a lot of big tech companies out there that are working pretty hard to find a way to take part in those commissions that are being paid out. And I think as technology continues to improve, as realtors don't get better at adding value to their clients, the consumer sentiment is starting to think that, you know, why do I really need a realtor? Not all of them, right? But some of them. And I think especially when they've had maybe a lackluster performance from a realtor, it really kind of jades them and jades their immediate network. And I believe that as technology continues to improve, that everybody that gets paid at the closing table, title companies, lenders like yourself, realtors, of course, they're really going to create, you know, the best thoughts, the best ideas, the best practices, the best thinking out there in order to help produce such significant value to the homeowner that they couldn't do on their own, that, of course, realtors are needed. I think where realtors get in trouble is where they still are kind of living in the past, where they feel like their value is in holding the information, or that's not necessarily the case anymore. And what you've shared here, to me, is this revolutionary, cutting edge with regards to what the average consumer could never figure out necessarily on their own unless they worked at Facebook or had gone through the years of training that you had, to be able to get the amount of exposure and the amount of offers, etc. So I appreciate you sharing that. It really, in my opinion, sets you apart, and part of the reason why we really like aligning with people like yourself is because it really is significantly valuable in a way that really helps the end consumer. And I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that and kind of our kind of shared view of where real estate's going, and how those that do what we do and do what realtors do need to do to really stay super uber relevant and valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100% with the value add to the transaction. So end client, realtor, my position with a realtor, I do believe that it's all about value. The market is not likely to be like this forever, right? We've seen ebbs and flows in real estate. And one of the things that I believe is that if, like you're saying, if there's all these advances that push towards commoditization, what is it that you're actually doing to maximize a seller's price, or maximize the time that it's on the market, maximize in terms of selling it as quickly as possible? Because gone are the days, I believe, I think that it's still occurring because of the nature of our market now, but in my own mind, gone are the days that you can just stick a sign in the yard and pray to RMLS gods that a buyer's going to come flowing through. What I believe, and as our market transitions especially, and I don't have any crystal ball when that could potentially happen, but when things become not as exuberant as they are in real estate, what is it? What value are you providing to your home seller to maximize their dollar, to make sure that you're actually earning what it is that you're getting paid? I think that's where the distaste is among people that try to potentially sell the home on their own, is they don't see the value. And I forget the saying where it says something like, price in the absence of value is expensive, right? Because if I'm able to, as a realtor, sell your home for more than you thought you could in a shorter period of time than average, what value proposition is that to you as a home seller? And that's what we're creating with the strategies that we're using is creating that value where a realtor doesn't have to go into the listing conversation and get notched down in the amount of commission that they're going to get paid, because they're actually creating the value that the home seller sees. And so when my agents go in and they say, listen, my marketing system, while I do some of the old school, I get a sign in your yard, I put it on RMLS, and that in and of itself distributes to many different websites, many of which people will never actually look for your home on. But I do those things as part of my system, but where the true value is going to be is that I actually pay to get thousands of sets of eyes on your property so that we will maximize the amount of activity, which then drives prices up. And so if I'm able to target the people that are most likely to buy your house, then I'm going to have a pool of people that are in line fighting to buy your home. And that, I believe, is what a lot of agents don't understand is, they go in with a 25-page ringed out presentation that doesn't provide any value, because at the end of the day, all that they're really doing is putting an RMLS and putting a sign in the yard, and they're hoping that the market will bring them the buyer. What I do is, one of the strategies I do is, on behalf of my agents, is I send these marketing and property profiles out to the top 500 agents, because I know that the likely buyer for my realtor's home, their listing, is going to come from another agent. And so if I can put these properties in front of the top 500 agents in this area, then I'm getting more eyes that can communicate and reach more people. And then in conjunction with that, we do these landing pages, we do some very strategic and targeted marketing so that there's no other home that's going to get more exposure than the realtors that I'm working with. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, any additional thoughts on that?
Well, Tony, you forgot the third of the 3 Ps. It's put it on MLS, put the sign in the yard, then you pray, right? You forgot that one, the third pre. Yeah. No, and I think that's, I'm actually in the process of selling my home right now, and I was actually talking to the agent that's selling it last night, and we almost were having this exact conversation. Even in this market where you can argue how good the market is, a lot of what we got going on right now is we have no inventory, right? So anytime a home goes on the market, we had 23 or 24 offers on our home first weekend all over asking price, because I like my home, don't get me wrong, but it also is because there wasn't a lot out there for anybody else to look at. I will tell you, though, what our real estate agent has had to do once those came in has been significant. It's unbelievable how what you have to do these days to manage the transaction. But why someone would want to partner with you as well is then how do you maximize that kind of exposure, right? Once you have that much interest, and you've helped generate the interest, and then how do you manage that interest so that you can grow your database and your network exponentially from having that, right? As a real estate agent, there is nothing better than listings, right? It's leads, listings, and leverage. You're solving one of those problems depending where you're at in your career. And so if you're partnering with someone like you that can help you solve those problems, I would say that's pretty easy. But I have to ask you, where's the pushback? So when you come in and you talk about social media, where do you get pushback still in 2016 where people say, I'm not sure social media works?
Absolutely. And it's kind of a funny phenomenon to me. People are somewhat guarded. But like other mediums of communication, there was an acceptance curve, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think back to even before cell phones, right? And so when the cell phone was introduced, sales guys, and I suspect realtors, were like, yeah, that's personal because it's $3 a minute or whatever, right? It's expensive. But then there was a sales guy out there somewhere that said, shoot, if I can expand my business, then that's a cost of doing business. And all of a sudden you started to see this evolution. And then you move to email, you move to text. We had the same resistance with people that said, oh, texting's 10 cents a word or something, and I only have so many texts I can do, and that's my personal number. I mean, how many times have you heard, they can just call me, I'm not going to text? And now we see that it's this completely adopted form of communication that everybody uses, including my mom, right? And so now when we fast forward through Facebook, it's the same thing. People began utilizing Facebook, myself included, as this platform to basically share online photos of my kids and my family and so forth with a select handful of people, right? I was locked down. You couldn't get my page unless you were invited, but it gave me this opportunity to create a photo album for my family to see, whether they were here or abroad. Well, now the paradigm shift is, what if that became your networking? What if it became your audience? I mean, think about this for a second. Let's say on average people have 500 friends. That may be more than some, but less for others. But let's say on average. So just the three of us, if we could come together, agree on the tips and techniques on how to trick Facebook so that my message went not only to my sphere, and there's ways to expand your own personal sphere, because Facebook constricts your message to about the people that you most recently engaged with, right? Otherwise, you would see a lot more activity than you do, because you probably have a lot more friends than you see their stuff, right? But what if I could expand outside of my own sphere and into your sphere and Justin's sphere? Now I've got 1,500 people that are seeing my message. So how big do you want to maximize that or amplify that? What if you had 10 people, right? Now you've got 5,000 sets of eyes. So to me, it's all a matter of identifying where someone's at right now with their social media behaviors, what their resistance is, and then showing them the way that it could be utilized to leverage for their business. And frankly, I've had agents that I no longer work with because they're unwilling to utilize Facebook for their business, or they're unwilling to change the way they utilize it for their business. One agent was afraid because she was a recovering alcoholic, 20 some years recovering alcoholic. I got to tell you, if someone doesn't like that in the realm of Facebook and people that you're reaching, you probably don't want to do business with them anyway, because that's something that should be celebrated. And that's another thing, is my coach taught me to live transparently, right? The more transparent you can be, the more people like yourself you will attract, right? So if I am a recovering alcoholic and I'm proud of it, then those are the types of people I'm going to attract, right? Those are the people that I'm going to do business. And don't we want to do business with people we know, like, and trust? And so I feel like the people that are resistant to Facebook as the potential for their business, they're ignoring this huge audience of people that they already know, like, and trust. And then if you take this a step further, I kind of joke and say, Facebook is like my own paparazzi, okay? Because I control it. I get to control what people see of me. And so if I have this medium, I mean, think about just how the paparazzi affects celebrities, right? In most cases, it's negative. However, I would argue that it's creating exposure and publicity, and in many ways actually furthers the potential for someone. And so if I actually have a medium like that where I can control it, now my audience sees what I want them to see, and I can be very strategic with that. Now if you take it a step further and you introduce video, it's exponential, because think about what reality TV did for the participants. I mean, I don't care what your opinions of the Kardashians are, whether they're good looking or bad looking or whatever, but the reality is that they don't contribute anything to society, and yet they are phenomenally successful, mostly due to reality TV. And so what if with YouTube, oh, and I'll give you this kind of where my light bulb went off. As you can see, I'm a 80s hairband dork, right? And a number of years ago, shoot, it's probably 8-10 years now, a TV show came out, a reality TV show that was about Ozzy Osbourne. Meet the Osbournes, I think it was. And I geeked out like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is going to be so awesome. two episodes in, I know what makes him crack up. I know what pisses him off. I know a lot of like nuances about him as a human being, and this very weird phenomenon occurs that I believe that if I were to bump into him at Starbucks, I would feel comfortable saying, "Hey, Ozzy, what's going on?" It breaks down that barrier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly a negative component to that, and that's probably where stalkers come from. But to me, it was this dramatic phenomenon that kind of validates this thinking, because what we tend to do as humans, and have done for decades, is we elevate people that are on TV, right? So Sean Penn, I'm not certain that he graduated high school even, and yet he always has a platform to speak politically from, and people listen. And it just is, it's mind-boggling where he doesn't have any real expertise in the field.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe he's highly educated. I could be wrong. But yet people give him a lot of credibility because he's on TV. And so think about the credibility that we can create through video, right? I utilize video in my business for a number of different reasons, and it's able to create almost this like mini celebrity within my niche, right? So, and it's less about me and more about the realtors that I work with. They're becoming celebrities and known and followed among their peers. And it's just a crazy phenomenon that really only video can create. And video's not, is it going to get here? It's already passing people up. There's a statistic I've said in 2014, the forecast for video content on the internet, 90% of all content created will be video related. And it also said that now over 35 hours of video content is uploaded to YouTube every single minute. 35 hours. So we go through 60 minutes of this podcast. It's, what is that, 2 weeks worth of video content? I mean, it's unbelievable. So it's not something that is going to come. It's here, and if you're not leveraging it in your business, then you're missing a significant opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. Being a young dad, I've probably seen all the Disney movies a couple of times. And I think about the movie, right? Where you have this the happening place, the happening path to get from A to B, and pretty soon they built this freeway out next to it, and Radiator Springs literally dried up and went away. And what I'm hearing you say is that those that don't embrace these new mediums of communication and of getting their brand and their audience out there are going to become, and have already become, kind of like the Route 66. Like, they were a great thing in the past, but the reality is that's not where people are at anymore. So as cute and as quaint as this little town may be, and as sweet and as wonderful and as capable of a realtor as this person may be, the reality is nobody's there. Nobody's going there. Nobody can hear your message because you're broadcasting it where no one's at.
I agree, and think about realtors that you guys know that have been in the business 10, 15 years that largely live on their book of business that creates kind of repeat business. But what happens when someone comes in between them, whether it's just a second opinion because they have a friend or a cousin or an uncle and they say, oh my gosh, you've got to talk to this agent because they're doing crazy stuff. And so they entertain that person by saying, oh, you know, we've always used our lady from church, but you know, we'll sit down with them just to provide value back to you, to like appreciate that gesture. And then that agent comes in and shows the actual value that they're bringing that go way beyond the 3 Ps, right? Then all of a sudden they're starting to question, what is the value of that legacy agent versus this new agent that has really compelling ideas and experience and results? I mean, that's the cool thing, is that with marketing stuff, or video marketing stuff, you build these assets that people can find you with, right? So the second largest search engine on the internet is YouTube. People go to YouTube to search, like, how do I change a carburetor, or whatever. I mean, they look on YouTube as an actual search engine, It's the second largest. Now it's owned by Google. And so a lot of information's commingled. If you Google something now, you'll get video results, YouTube results in that search result. So what I'm saying is that the more video content that you create and create a library of, now your search engine optimization goes up. When people start to search real estate, Portland real estate, you start to become integrated into those results because of those video assets that you've created. So there's just a lot of different strategies that if you don't embrace, I feel like, yeah, you are a commodity then. I mean, really then, what is the value? Your subscription to RMLS? I mean, and is that worth 2.5%, 3.5%? I mean, it'd be hard to justify your value as a home seller or a home buyer representation if that's all that you're doing. I mean, shoot, I would have a hard time with that. I'd have a hard time if I were a realtor looking myself in the mirror and saying, man, I get paid substantial money because home prices are much, much higher than they were 20, 30 years ago. And so the same levels of commission on those high purchase price amounts are creating unbelievable livelihoods. So if you're the recipient of that, what are you giving? How are you serving? What's the value that you're bringing to that situation? So, yeah, I mean, and one of the things I wanted to follow up with Steve on one of the things that you had said, which was, what are the things that you do beyond like getting exposure? Like you were saying, you're getting 24 offers in the first week. One of the things that it occurred to me when Craigslist started becoming popular among realtors because it was free advertising and it was easy and it became part of their system, and it's almost like they felt like they felt like they were doing something, right? They felt like they were prospecting or really generating a step that was going to help propel the sales, right? But I always wondered, okay, you don't know who necessarily viewed that ad, and you certainly sell the home one time, but let's say 100 people looked at that ad and they were interested in the home. Or in your case, 24 people were interested in your home. One bought it. What happened to the other 23? So through my systems, I utilize the same techniques that Facebook does. I place a tracking pixel among the people that respond, and then I'm able to retarget them with my agent's other listings. So I now have a pool of people that have shown interest in a particular area and a particular price range. And so they don't get like left out or lost. These are people that we can continue to market to, not only now but over time. So there's certainly too many things to go into in a podcast like this, but one thing that I will say is that in 14 years of doing this, the challenges that realtors have, I feel, can be distilled into two things. Really, all the other stuff is noise. It comes down to they need more leads or they need more time. And so when I sit down with a new agent, and new, I mean new relationship, that's the things that we focus on. Identify where they're at currently, what their challenges are. Because again, my company and the company's culture handles the transaction beautifully. That's not where my value proposition is. I mean, it's valuable because it needs to occur efficiently in order for them to get a paycheck. But that's the company transactional side. The value to me is identifying what are their challenges and what strategies can we put in place to effectively leverage and create growth with those challenges. So sometimes it's a blending of both. Because typically if you have an agent that has too many leads, they have no time. And if you find an agent that has a lot of time, they generally don't have any leads. But a lot of times, especially in a market like this, you'll kind of find a combination of the two. So I like to start with the foundation stuff. What's the systems that they have in place? What are some things that we can do with video to create efficiencies in their sales process? And then once we get that dialed in, now they can scale their business, right? So instead of worrying about getting more leads because they won't have the time to handle them, we have a scalable system that is able to take on more business, able to take on more leads. Then we jump into lead generation and really effectively increasing the amount of lead flow that they get.
Great stuff, Tony. As I mentioned when we started, I think the world is changing pretty quickly, and those parties that can help realtors succeed the most, at the end of the day, will own the market. I think, one thing that I love telling realtors is that there's no shortage of good ideas out there, but there is a massive shortage of implementation. And I think maybe being probably like-minded sales professionals that, we tend to love good ideas, but we tend to love so many of them that come around that the consistency in applying them is where actually the magic happens, and oftentimes where the breakdown occurs. And I love kind of what you've laid out here, is because even though there's these great ideas are circulating everywhere, it kind of comes down to who are you partnering with, who are you sending business to that's going to help you implement these good ideas, not just tell you about them, but who's going to actually help you implement them. And I think that's where realtors can really differentiate themselves by looking around. Who's my support team to make sure I'm doing the good ideas, not just hearing about a new one every other day. So great stuff. Really appreciate your time today. I feel like I've got a number of other questions, but for the sake of time, we might have to follow up on a phase 2 kind of rendition. But at least I think you brought some really valuable content to us, as well as to others. Any kind of final words or thoughts, Steve, you want to throw in?
Well, first and foremost, Tony, how do people find you? If someone hears this and says, man, I want to get a hold of this guy, how do they find you?
They can go to my website, mymortgageguytony.com. That was born from actually the marketing that I did for an agent, and she started getting hit up by other agents saying, man, I love your marketing. Who does it? She said, you got to talk to my mortgage guy, Tony. And so they can go to my website. My contact information is there. And, yeah, I'd be happy to meet up with people. I mean, I think, I was talking about living transparently and kind of that law of attraction, and whatever your beliefs are on the law of attraction, I do believe that it's brought people together like Steve, you, and Justin, and myself. I really am compelled by the stuff that you guys are doing in the industry. So it's exciting to see that there are game changers, right? That even though, and here's a real testament to what you guys are doing. Because the reality is now is the time that most people sit back and go, yeah, life's good. Deals are flowing. And to me, it's like, well, I'm a product of making it through what may have been one of the hardest real estate economies we've ever encountered. And so to me, it's like, well, what are we doing to create sustainable business? And to me, that's the game-changing stuff, the thought-changing stuff. Like you guys say, think bigger. Think bigger than your current situation, because your current situation may be great, but until you build systems and processes in place and the value that those create that will sustain slowdowns, then your business is just a product of the economy. It's not really a product of any kind of expertise. And so to me, that's where this kind of law of attraction thing is. I mean, I'm just excited to be working with you guys, because you guys are doing those things when other people are cashing checks. Other people are saying, oh, life's good. I mean, I'm sure you guys are cashing checks too, but because the real estate is really good right now. But I'm pumped that there's people out there that are willing to commit to making change.
Yeah, the separation absolutely happens, even when times are good, right? Because you get people that are differentiating despite it being good. So that as that market drops, all those that haven't differentiated, haven't provided value, have to exit because they didn't do anything to gain market share. So yeah, I think we're setting ourselves up to be really, really valuable to realtors. And anyway, appreciate your time. Thanks everybody for joining in. And Tony, really appreciate it. Just such valuable, rich content. And we'll definitely do this again. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me.